This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so first matter of business is this is a meeting of the planning board on August 17th, and it is 6:05 p.m. And we are meeting virtually by video conference due to recent orders from the governor regarding the coronavirus pandemic. And the links to this meeting are on the village website, and the public is welcome to join and view the discussion. With that said, I'll make a motion to open the workshop session.
No, second.
How do you vote?
Aye.
Aye. Let the record show that 4 members of the planning board are present: Justin Vlietstra, Justin Lightgib, David Marshall, and Susan Loda, and all voted in favor of the motion to open the meeting. Okay, so with that said, we're starting with our workshop, and I'm not sure what all we want to go over in the workshop, but I'll start with a few updates. I was talking to Susan earlier, and Mindy was wondering if we needed her at the meeting, and I talked it over with Susan, and we both thought that we're just discussing some of our findings. We don't really have any legal questions right now, and if we have any questions for her, we'll compile them and ask them to her another time. So I told her she could have the night off. So with that said, since the mayor is present, Bob, do you have any updates on Mindy's contract? You were discussing it at your last meeting.
Yeah, I presented it at the last meeting. Mindy had sent it to me. Dan wanted more time to look at it, but I expect that we'll approve it at our next regular board meeting.
So a question I had regarding it is we had talked about having meetings like every other month, and that was not in our contract. Did you guys discuss that at all?
That was the one thing we did discuss, is that perhaps we should ask to amend it to reflect what you think your projected schedule is going to be, so we're not paying for meetings that you don't have.
Yeah, I don't know what our schedule is going to be, but we've had no applications. So we've had, I think, 1 application since October. So we're not in need of a lot of legal services for our regular business right now. So I would definitely encourage some way to scale it back. Did anyone else have thoughts on that?
I think we were all in agreement. Mm-hmm. Renee, do you remember our discussion from the board meeting last night? She can't hear. But I think we felt the same thing. That point was discussed. We were going to talk to Mindy in her office and see if she would amend it accordingly for something that suits the situation we're currently in.
Yep, makes sense.
Renee, we can't
I am
hear
having
you.
terrible, I have green light. What is going on? It keeps cutting out. Oh.
That's not supposed to happen, Renee.
Ow! Can you guys hear me yet or no?
Yes. Yep, now we can hear you.
You can hear me now? Yep. It keeps cutting in and out.
You also look like you're fast. You're moving in a blur. You're so fast.
Oh my goodness, I will be still. How about if I just sit like this? So my laptop broke. I'm using my desktop and I have this fancy new camera. So my apologies for looking like the Flash. What did the mayor ask? He said, is that your recollection about discussing with Mindy the reduced schedule where you all were going to meet every other month and then everything froze? Did I have a talking part after that?
I think Bob was just saying that you're going to talk about, you guys thought that was a reasonable thing to do. And I think the planning board was in agreement that that's a reasonable thing to do, to meet every other month with her. I don't think we need her every month. We haven't needed her every month.
Given the continued
not working, Renee.
now.
I think Renee,
Renee, you might want to call in on your phone.
Yeah, it could be a Wi-Fi issue between your desktop and the router.
Yeah. Okay.
It seems like every virtual meeting has one issue like this. Sign of the times.
what are we listening to now?
I think Renee is typing us messages in the chat.
So we can only hear her keyboard. We can't actually hear Renee. That must be a very interesting kind of setup.
Secret messages. I'm
decode
sending
it.
secret messages. I've turned my camera off. Can you all hear me better?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. It's something squirrely with that fancy ass camera I got. I might have to use my kid's Chromebook like I used for last week. All right, so you all can hear me. You are frozen for me, but you're all smiling. So I'm going to leave the camera off and give me a message if I'm still having, if you're still having trouble hearing me.
No, we can hear you just fine now. Or at least I can hear you just fine.
Okay, sweet.
Okay, so our initial discussion was on our attorney, and it sounded like everyone basically agreed that every other month would be reasonable because we have a lack of applications right now, and that would help cut some costs.
Yep.
Yep, and that's what I remember from our meeting last week that we, is Dan talking to Mindy, or who was going to have that discussion?
I'll call her. I'll call her.
Okay.
So that's that matter. Let's see, what else is there going on? Bob, do you have any new things involving the trustees that might be of interest to the planning board?
Well, I think I've been talking to Renee, and we wanted to talk a little bit about the active transportation plan. Because Susan invited me to come over to her shop last week, and Susan and I spoke about it. I read through your draft comments, which I think I agree with most of them. Some of them with DOT, we've asked for those things before, which we would have no way of knowing. But and I like Renee. Renee, can you hear me?
I can hear. I'm just putting it on mute so you don't hear me breathing.
All right. We recognize that the active transportation plan is outdated, and in some ways it's not as specific as it needs to be. We agree it needs an update. In talking to Renee, I think we also want to get the thing adopted. And I think Renee and I think the rest of the board would agree that if we did adopt it, to give you assurance that we would do a resolution committing to an update because we agree for the need. Couple things that we're concerned about. One is that we have a partner with the town that is eager to adopt it, which we're trying to collaborate and work with. A second issue is that because it's dragged on so long at this point for a variety of reasons, the funding agency, the Genesee Regional Transportation Council, is also eager to get the books closed on this project because it's gone longer than it should have. And then I think the last and the most compelling reason is that Renee and I have been conducting meetings with the New York State Department of Transportation to try to integrate as many possible improvements into their upcoming paving projects that are taken directly from the ATP. And they've told us it's too bad you don't have your ATP adopted, because then we could use that as justification for doing a little bit more. So that's just kind of a summary. So when I talked to Susan last week, I said, well, we'll just delay it. but I think I'm thinking it through and also talking to Bill Smith and to Renee that maybe a sounder strategy is to simply quickly adopt what we have and then go in and really rework it and get the document that we have. And the other reason that that really does make sense is no planning document is supposed to be a static thing. That's why when we did our 2004 comprehensive plan, we had 5 updates to it, because that's what you're supposed to do, adopt it, you know, as things change over time and you do new studies to keep it up to date. So I wouldn't hesitate to do that. If we updated it, we could do it unilaterally without the town, which would simplify the process, reduce the cost, and the only thing we would have to do is get the amendment approved by the Department of State. Oh, actually, we don't even need to do that. I'm thinking LWRP, and we don't have to do that with an active transportation plan. I misspoke, right? So Renee,
Bob,
do you want to add anything to what I just said?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Susan.
So when do you anticipate the town adopting this?
It would be after, Dorothea already talked to Susie at the town, and it would be after the 60-day period that of the referral to you all. So it would be sometime after September 15th. So it would likely be the end of September. I can't remember the exact date that Dorothea had, but she coordinated with both boards' calendars to make sure. I feel like it's around the 30th or something. I can get you the exact date.
No, I was just wondering what the town schedule was.
Okay, so Bob, we've been looking quite a bit at the LWRP, and LWRP is all you need to work with the DOT, I think. I think they're ignoring it, and there's all kinds of stuff in the LWRP about transportation and traffic calming and stuff like that. It doesn't have specific designs, but in terms of them, it actually requires them to do more. It says in there, if they're doing major road work, that it needs to address transportation improvements for bicyclists and pedestrians and access to the canal and so on. So they're kind of required to do improvements.
I think that, oh, go ahead, Bob.
I was just going to say, under their definition, Justin, major road work is reconstruction and rebuilding a road. What they're doing is milling and paving, which they consider maintenance. Go ahead, Renee.
And then Elisa has a question as well. She's not on video, but she just put it in the chat. The one, I mean, these two documents are different. Their focus is different. The ATP is to provide a broad-based vision for pedestrian and bicycling. And it is about making it safer, it's about connectivity, and it's about the streetscape. It's about making the public realm, the street, where right now the cars are the priority and they're given the priority. It's about making that safe for pedestrians and cyclists. That's the focus. The LWRP is focused on preservation and protection of the historic character and of that waterfront there, of the canal. So it's like a very specific area. I think these are two different focus areas and they're complementary. That's my opinion. Now you all have to make your own judgment call. That's why you're an independent board. I think they complement one another. The LWRP was passed in 2005, and it gives things like recommendations for pedestrian and cycling as part of the character. And I don't think it's specific enough, other than the suggestion about the light and some concepts about the streetscape on Shane Place, a lot of which has been already added. Bob can talk more about that since he's been around forever. But these two focus areas are very different, and they complement one another. So I saw Susan shaking her head, but that's what I think.
Justin, did you want to let Elisa make her comment?
Yeah, sure. Lisa, you're welcome. I think you're unmuted. You're welcome to comment. But first question is, should we wait for the regular meeting to go over this and the public hearing to be opened? Does that make sense?
It may make more sense to have that in that part of the record. I don't know. It's up to you.
Well, the only reason, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
The only reason why I wanted to make a comment is that I also serve on the ATP committee, you know, which is what, so if you want me to wait, I'll wait. It's up to you guys.
Given that the public hearing is not officially open yet, maybe we should wait and then make that motion and then get everything on the record. Does that make the most sense, Justin? Or?
Well,
yeah, I think so.
My comment was because I'm a member of the Active Transportation Plan Committee and have been part of this process, and my comment was to speak to the process. So I'll wait.
Yeah, I have a process comment as well. So we can wait. Someone's coming in on a spaceship, and it's not me. I don't know where that's coming from, but I don't know who that is.
That's me.
Oh, Linda, you sound like you're on a spaceship.
You know,
okay, that's better.
I just muted Linda.
Okay.
I can unmute her. If Linda, if you raise your hand or type something in the chat box, I will unmute you, or I think that you may be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, the camera's not working, but that's okay because I don't really look that nice tonight. But I can hear. Go ahead, carry on.
Okay, thank you. We might just mute you again if the feedback occurs from your side, but it's fine right now.
Okay, and this is recording, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you.
So while we have a few minutes before we open the public hearing on this, maybe we can cover some other background stuff since we have two trustees on. A couple other things I guess I wanted to find out about. You guys were talking about speed cameras at your last meeting. Did you get to any thoughts on that?
I can speak to that. I did get a lot of information on speed cameras, which I actually have printed out, and I'm taking it with me, along with information on, there's a new guideline for this. I think it was the federal government has issued new standards for speed limits in urban areas. And David Cruz just sent Renee and I.
NATCO
Thank you.
Released it in response to the federal call for action.
For new standards for,
yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Thank you.
And they're saying 25 as a minimum, which is what we're asking for in the state, oh my gosh, in Albany, and then 20 on, side roads. So it's consistent with what we've been saying and consistent with what we're asking for. But we'd have to have the state lower it to 20.
Worldwide push to achieve 20-mile-per-hour speed limits in walkable urban districts. But back to speed cameras, later this week, I have an executive board Zoom meeting with NICOM. I'm going to be asking them for more information. In New York State, the only place I think where they've installed speed cameras is in somewhere down near New York City. Do you remember where it was, Renee?
Well, it's New York City has put them in the school zones. Toronto has deployed them. DC has deployed them as well with great success.
So I'm going to see if I can get any contacts to get some, so we can actually find out what the experience has been, where they've been installed. Everything I've read about them sounds positive, but it's only difficult because I'm not sure if they're allowed by New York State traffic law yet. We might need to do what we're doing with the speed limits. We also want to make sure that if we install them, see if there's a way we could get some revenue from it, because with our traffic volumes, there could be another silver lining to it. They do seem to be effective. And I think given the speeds that we found recently from our speed sentry stationed on State Street, there definitely is a need for enforcement. And I don't think it's feasible right now to get the enforcement level we need from the Sheriff's Department. They have put Jefferson Road, or excuse me, State Street on their attention list all summer. I don't think the residents are satisfied. And Dan Keating noticed a few days ago that they also had a radar set up on East Jefferson Road, which is also a problem.
So I don't think I've ever seen enforcement on State Street. So, I mean, I've seen the radar things there, but I've never seen a police car there. What is the hindrance to getting that done?
We have talked at length with the Sheriff's Department, and Renee, if you want to take this, feel free. They are stretched thin for a variety of reasons. They cover a large area, and so speed enforcement, unfortunately, with the manpower they have, hasn't been their highest priority. And I don't know if Renee, you can add anything to that.
I mean, it is a priority of theirs. It's just that they have a lot of special attention requests, and ours is one of them. And they do deploy regularly, and they sometimes put a decoy there. Sometimes Captain DeLizer, the Zone A captain himself, will sit there in an unmarked car to get a better idea of speeding. And they do go out and they do speed enforcement. State Street isn't the only street that they're doing it on. And they've also got, Pittsford, Parrington, and what else are they covering? Penfield?
Penfield and parts of Webster. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, it's about a shared resource. And I also think, enforcement is one piece of this, but design has the biggest impact on driver behavior. So we do need enforcement, but we don't have a designated traffic enforcement or even, sheriff for Pittsford, even for the town of Pittsburgh. And we know all this traffic is not village traffic. So it's they are going out. We can't be their only priority, unfortunately.
And I think in fairness to the Sheriff's Department, if you go to Fairport, where they actually do have a police force and they do regular enforcement on East Church Street and South Main Street, they still have similar speeding problems to us. And even with regular enforcement, it's only part of the answer. That's why we continue to pursue physical changes that provide visual cues to drivers that you must slow down. So I think as Renee have said, and I have said over and over and over again, there's no silver bullet. It's a matter of finding, implementing, and using every single tool that's available to produce change.
Okay. So right now, it sounds like you're evaluating these speed cameras. You've made no decision yet as to whether you want to pursue that. You're still got to find out if it's legal. And that was what my initial thought is like, is this legal? When I first saw that, there's got to be a reason why no one's using these.
The mayor did talk to NICOM.
Yeah, I think the answer to that is somebody always has to go first. And because in New York State, even as a village, we are subject to New York State vehicle and traffic law. I'm not sure if these are even permitted. And so that's the next answer. So I think the village board generally is in support of this, but it's going to take time to get all the answers. And if we do have to pass a local law, that's another hurdle that we know takes a long time based on our experience already with the years-long effort to reduce our speed limit.
And they're expensive.
Correct.
So, there's definitely some public wariness around cameras in general. But we know the red light camera program in Rochester got a lot of pushback, and it wasn't deployed fairly across all neighborhoods. So it unfairly burdens some of the poorer neighborhoods, which was an unfortunate misstep in the way they handled it. But like the data showed that it did change driver behavior. They did there were significantly less crashes, significantly less people running red lights. So it did change behavior. And we have data from that across the globe, across the nation. But, there's some public awareness about having cameras up too. So that's something we need to think about.
Okay, so if you had those speed cameras, at what point would they like hand out tickets? If you're driving 31, would you get a ticket?
That's what the mayor is going to find out.
Yeah, you would get mailed a ticket, and then you would end up with an appearance ticket in Pittsford Town Court. The problem we have right now with all the tickets that are issued in the village is because the village does not have a court, all the revenue, there's a state surcharge and the rest of the revenue goes to the town to pay for the court system. We would like a system that would help offset the cost of acquiring and running the cameras. And that's why I'm pretty sure this will require probably an act of the state legislature to pass a state law to allow us to do this and to also get some revenue to fund it.
Well, it sounds like you'll be having like 10,000, there's what, 20,000 vehicles a day? So that means at least 10,000 tickets a day.
The busy streets have over 16,000 vehicles a day. So there is a potential for some reasonable revenue, unless we solve the speeding problem, which would be even better.
So 10,000 tickets a day, that's like, almost $1 million bucks a day. We could like...
I don't think that's a realistic expectation, Justin. I don't think everyone is.
Well, I'm agreeing with you, but I'm sure if a judge saw his agenda for a monthly meeting and saw over 100,000 cases on the agenda, they'd have a hard time getting through that.
Well, if it worked well, people would slow down and not get tickets anymore.
Either way, it's a win. Either way would be a win, but it sounds promising.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for the update. So we're up to 6:30 now. So we can go ahead and open our regular meeting then, and we'll open the public hearing for the LWRP review and listen to any comments that we receive. So with that said, I'll go ahead and make a motion to end our workshop session and open our regular meeting. And I'm also going to note we have all 5 members of the planning board now present. So with that said, do we have a second?
Second.
How do we vote?
Aye.
Aye. Was that an aye from Joanne? I guess that's so. Susan? Okay. Well, I think we had unanimous consent to open the meeting. So with that said, we'll go ahead and move forward with that. So I guess I could just go ahead and make a motion right now to, before we do that, I guess we haven't had a conflict of interest disclosure in ages, have we? Does anyone have any conflicts of interest to disclose?
Anyone who likes bicycles, anyone who rides a bicycle, just kidding.
Yeah. Anybody who owns stock in a bicycle company, more than 5%.
All right. Yeah, so I heard no conflicts of interest to disclose. All right. I'll go ahead and open public hearing then for the LWRP review of the active transportation plan. Do we have a second on that motion?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so let the record show it was seconded by Susan Loda and it was unanimous approval by all 5 board members to open the public hearing. So with that said, let's go ahead and if anyone would like to address the board and send us any comments they may have on the active transportation plan, by all means, go ahead.
I'll make a comment just on behalf of the Board of Trustees. I want to thank the board for the effort that you've made. I think consistently, I'm very proud that our planning board has really fulfilled the planning mission of the planning board besides individual applications. you really take that mission seriously. And obviously it was evident last year in the review of the comprehensive plan and the zoning update, but you've done it once again. And so we're grateful for the work that you do.
All right. Thank you, Mayor Corby. Much appreciated. Elisa, you requested to speak earlier. Do you have any comments for the board at this time?
Yes, yeah, in fact, I just asked if I could speak. Yeah, I'd like to echo Bob's sentiments. Thanks so much for all the work you've done on this, and also, once again, on the comp plan too. You're really such a diligent board and go above and beyond every single time, and it's really appreciated. I just want to speak a little bit about process, and I know you guys were talking in the workshop earlier. You know, the idea of just let's pass what we have with the town. I get that. I just would like to make sure in terms of process that the ongoing editing is ongoing, that it doesn't stop, that it's just simply, we just still keep moving forward with everything that needs to be done in terms of the updating. Are you with me?
Okay, no, very good. Did you get, by the way, Lisa, did you get a copy of our initial comments that we sent to the trustees? I think they're on our agenda on the website, but I didn't know if that was sent out to the whole ATP committee.
I have comments from Renee. Renee, you sent me something yesterday.
I sent, those are the comments. I made a copy so I could start working on my own comments, and I sent it to you and Brooke. So that's the exact same thing. That's what Justin posted on Facebook. That's what's in the agenda tonight, and it was what was in our meeting packet as well. It's 7 pages. It begins with the Spanish
yes,
translation.
I do have that. Yep, then we're all on the same page. I haven't had a chance to go through the whole thing. I did want to say, you know, I was listening to your comments, Renee, about the LWRP, you know, complementing the ATP, and there's a couple of thoughts that I want to run past the group. One is the LWRP is an extremely important document, and I'm so glad that, you know, we're really looking at that and what it does mean relative to the ATP. Also, I do think it's important that we give the definition of what the LWRP is and what it's supposed to do, like really round that out and have a narrative component about how it relates to the active transportation plan. You know, why is it important? Because the LWRP is a document that has standing. So I think it's important on a lot of levels to kind of nail that down right up front.
Yeah, I agree with you. Elisa and I spoke about this before too. I don't know why it wasn't included in the initial policy documents, and maybe there was a reason, but we made sure it was in the supplement or is that what we're calling? Yeah. It's extremely important, and I don't know why it wasn't in there. Maybe Mayor Corby, do you know why it wasn't included in the original policy?
The consultant overlooked it. They actually missed other documents that we had to remind them and put in there. It was just overlooked. But I would also
luckily our process requires us to do an LWRP, but our review, consistency review. But anyway, if we can underscore what I hear Elisa saying is maybe even putting more language in that addendum, regardless of whether we work on it later or not.
May I continue? May I continue with the public hearing with my comments? May I continue?
You may continue, Lisa.
Sorry to interrupt you, Bob, but I just kind of have a, you know, it's the public hearing here.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks. The other thing was we have this information now as a supplement, and part of what this process should be as we amend and edit the document, it should never be a supplement. These are actual components that should be incorporated 100% into the main body of the document. Otherwise, as we all know, a supplement has sort of a different, I think, connotation in terms of the work that's done. People may or may not read that. This stuff's important. It has to go right back into the document, and the document, we own that document. we've all had these discussions about the fact that it can't be edited and it has to be in a different format. We have a lot of smart people in this village, I think, who could help us out, because I think this needs to be one solid working document, period. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Elisa. I guess that's a question, and I saw Justin just asked it. Do we actually have the document, not in PDF form, but in the original form?
I think we're going to need to press the town to get it from Matt, because I didn't have any luck and the contract was with the town, but we own it. So why are you laughing, Justin?
I'm just laughing because I was actually told that you might have a copy, so I guess they're tossing us back and forth.
They're tossing, yeah. So I have tried, and maybe Mayor Corby, you can try. Matt, the last I received a message from him was that it was a hybrid, and so he was going to contact whoever they used to put together the hybrid. So we definitely own this, and putting it together. I mean, Elisa and I talked about trying to incorporate. Originally, the plan was to take what was in that supplement and actually put it into the document before this process, and we just didn't get it in time, whatever it is. So I don't know how to get it. I was a citizen as part of this committee, so I would ask, like, how do we do this?
I'll talk to Bill Smith, and
okay.
one or the other of us. He probably has more clout because they had a bigger share of the fee, but we should be able to get something from him. Let's see what we can do. I also wanted to make a comment going back to Elisa's earlier comment about the importance of the LWRP. I think what you really want to state is that the LWRP is important to our village because the canal corridor is intrinsic to the economic success of our downtown. It's been revitalized as a major destination, which has revitalized the entire village. And it's fundamental to the quality of life that we enjoy here. So really, every aspect of what's important about the village is dominated by the canal. As much as any village I can think of, the canal really is an intrinsic part of life in the village of Pittsford.
So that's what we should put in that narrative that I was talking about. I mean, in other words,
Exactly.
Essentially, Bob, you're talking where the edits should go, which is, it takes us right back to that. But just very quickly, we own the document, and the irony is, if we're all talking about making a commitment to continue with the edits, and we can't edit the document, does anybody see the irony?
Yeah, Elisa, if I do appreciate that, and if I might expand on what I was saying a moment before, I've probably sent 10 or 12 emails, some of them to Renee, some of them to members of the town board. I've heard the document is proprietary. I've been told the document is in multiple pieces and that we do own it, and nobody's been able to give us a straight answer. So I'm losing a little bit of hope that we will get that document to be able to modify it.
Yeah, I also contacted Matt Ingalls directly and asked him for it, and I didn't get a response. I mean, I could whip out my, I've always been wanting to issue a subpoena for something. So.
Well, isn't that fun?
I have these subpoena powers. I haven't figured out what to use them for. So I thought of, inviting people that would prefer not to attend one of our meetings to show up.
Would we be able to review the contract that was signed with the consultant to see ownership of product?
It's on the town's website, and I can actually forward it to everyone. I feel like I sent it. I feel like I sent it to Justin, maybe. A couple.
I don't think I have a copy.
Okay, yeah, I just pulled it out of the minutes on the town website because I couldn't find it either, and so I just searched. So we
because
do have
it would be in the contract as to who owns the final product.
Yeah.
Well, it's taxpayer funded. I think taxpayers have to own it.
One would think, wouldn't one?
The client always owns the final product. It would be highly unusual.
Well, yes. So all you're doing is underscoring the same point. We own the thing. We need to edit it. We need to put it in a format that works for our village. It's about our village, not the consultant.
Right.
So what's the next step on that?
Yeah, just so to update the record, I know I was talking to Justin Lakegib, and both of us work as contractors for computer-related services and software, and we always give out the either on a request or just automatically give out the original editable versions of the software source code and all that. So that's common practice, and so I don't know why it's been so difficult to get this. But I also agree, Elisa, that I think it makes sense to edit the original plan. A lot of the updates aren't necessarily difficult changes to make to the plan, but someone's going to most likely read the original document, and then when they see that there's an addendum, they may never open it. I think we've glossed over it in it for the most part.
Yep. Yep.
So given that a lot of them aren't that difficult to make, it would make sense. So if we can get the source document, that would be wonderful to get that updated.
I've written myself a note to call him tomorrow. Sometimes he's hard to reach, but I'm going to be in the office tomorrow, and I will call Matt again and ask him if he can send us a viable, usable, doctorable document.
Right. I mean, Elisa and I tried to do this long, but before the final draft was also given, and we had a very difficult time getting an editable version.
Did they ever send you anything, Renee, or no?
No. Well, Elisa was on the board of trustees at the time, and I believe she didn't even ever have luck.
They didn't send anything.
Yeah.
They never responded with anything.
Okay.
So it's been a long haul, and part of it is that this is a big, broad project that was done with 2 municipalities, which is also one of the benefits, because it finally lets us underscore that this isn't just something the village wants. This is something that the town wants, and it supports the village efforts as well. So I mean, it is a dated document. The work began in 2015, and all the charrettes and walking audits and bike audits and survey, all of that was completed by 2017, and then it's just been sitting there. So having a baseline, having this at least as a foundation to send a message that we have a town and a village that are working together, that prioritize pedestrian and bike safety, and that they support the heart of this village, has great merit as well. And I've gone back and forth over whether we delay this for another year so we can put everything that that is now dated and update it. But like it went through its process. It had the public involvement. If we come up with a list of suggestions that we think should be in there as a board and as trustees, without involving the public, it doesn't feel appropriate to me either, because we need to hear from our residents when we're doing this. And the original plan did that. We reached out to residents, they gave input, they put stickies on maps, and all of that is reflected in this plan. And, we need to do that again to do an updated version with our priorities as a village. But again, that's my personal opinion about how the process should work.
But I don't think that updating the plan or seeking to update and amend and add in the supplements even begins to negate public input. And of course, we would always want to have supplements, but we would always want, public input and let people know what we're doing. That's part of government transparency. Right. If anything, I think it really drills down and really further encapsulates the goals that have been put forth by our community.
I agree with you, Elisa, that putting the supplement in there, but I meant some of the other 7 pages of suggestions, which were all fantastic, and I personally love them all. But we shouldn't be doing a bike boulevard outline with just these 2 boards. That's a pretty, it needs to be a collaborative process. That's one example.
Of course, when we hold a public charrette, it'd be great.
Right. Yeah. That's what I meant.
Right there with you.
Okay.
Well, I think the next exercise, we need to see, number one, can we get a modifiable document? Then determine, what's the time necessary to get the information that's needed to be integrated into it, and see what the time schedule is. Another option, if that turns out not to be viable, then maybe we take the raw stuff and we put it in a new village document that's formatted the way we like and is more usable than the current document. There are other weaknesses in this document that even those of us that were on the ATP subcommittee felt. For example, the keying of the map to the recommendations for the village is a little bit confusing, and it really doesn't highlight in the way that we really would like what our real vision is for village streets.
Okay. All right. We've heard some general discussion here. I think the next thing I would like to do is I just wanted to go over for the trustees a couple of key concerns that we've been talking about in our last several meetings, and I'd be interested in hearing how you what your thoughts are or how you'd like to address them. I listed a few of them in the trustee meeting on Tuesday, so I just thought it'd make sense to repeat some of that here. So first of all, we were looking at the LWRP document. One of the things that was quite clear was that improving access to the canal was really a prime directive in that document, and that was essentially omitted from being a directive in the ATP, which we thought was a real problem. We also thought the bridges over the canals are a particular problem because sidewalks aren't wide enough and they're not usable by bicyclists. And I know the trustees have been talking to DOT off and on about that, and I'm not sure where that's at. What I've gathered is it's not where we'd like it. I just want to hear any thoughts on changes you might be willing to make on improving the access to the canal, and any thoughts from any of the trustees that you have about that.
I think, we've worked obviously over the last 20 years to improve access. I think securing the land that the town has set aside as the Erie Canal Preserve is a big movement forward to make more of our waterfront accessible to the public. I think it's well captured in the ATP. I think the difference, between the ATP, the LWRP and the ATP is the LWRP addresses the canal as a recreational resource and all the other aspects of what the canal is in the community. The ATP is more directed towards just basic transportation needs versus recreational needs. So I think that's why it wasn't highlighted. I don't think any of us would argue against anything we can do to make the canal more accessible. There's no reason. It's always been our mission since we adopted our 2004 comprehensive plan. And even before that, there was an earlier plan on the canal that also included that goal.
Okay, let me just bring up a specific example. Let's talk about the Monroe Avenue Bridge. Right now, there is this dead space in the middle that's striped off. There's no bike lanes that anyone can use without likely getting hit by a car. I think they're 3 to 4 feet wide shoulders along the road. And the other side of the bridge, on the town side near Wegmans, there's no direct access to the canal there from the north side. The south side, you got to go through some streets. But the south side of Monroe Avenue, there's no sidewalk on that side, and there's also no bike lane on that side, nor any shoulder on that side right before the canal. So there's literally no way for someone to get from, say, Wegmans out to the canal. I think I was reading through some of the town section of the ATP, and they talked about putting a bi-directional sidewalk, possible a wide sidewalk or multi-use path on the north side of Monroe Avenue. But again, there's no connection to the canal there. So I think this is one of those things that if you're doing some revisions, thinking of Monroe Avenue and how to improve access to the canal and how to improve that whole linkage to the village, I think that would be a real sizable improvement that could be made. I don't think it's hard. I just think some adjustments could be made.
I would also add that Renee and I have talked to DOT about the condition of the sidewalk on all 3 state highway bridges over the canal. And unfortunately, I think that's one of the things that they, in my opinion, they seem like they've been a little bit intractable, especially on North Main Street. There's no reason for that striped area in the middle of the bridge. We've also talked to them on Monroe Avenue about that, and their argument for keeping it is they would use it as a detour when they repair the bridge so they could keep the bridge open. To me, that's not a great argument, but we have, every time we go and talk to them, we bring that issue up because it's such, you know, all three bridges, it's a safety issue, and the speeds are high. The one concession that I think we got out of them, and we'll see what their drawings show, but in our last meeting in July, they agreed to consistently stripe 10-foot traffic lanes. And that's something that they've waffled back and forth on for years. At one point, they restriped the village state highways to 10 foot. And then without telling us later, they restriped them back to 11 foot. So it's, you have to understand, we have been pushing, I think, consistently in every area that the active transportation plan has brought up. But dealing with the DOT, you know, they have a very focused mindset on moving cars. And although they've shown some flexibility, not quite as much as we would all like to see.
I might like to add to that. Susan, you want to go first?
Thanks, Dave. Yeah. So what I'm hearing on one hand is that the DOT has asked for a document that expresses the will of the public and what you would really like. And then at the other hand, you seem to be backpedaling a little bit because you've talked with them and they're unwilling to work. That would, to me, signal to make as strong a document as you possibly could. And, you know, without a supplement, you know, with it, you know, with all of the strength of the public will incorporated into the recommendations. So you know, why is the DOT, you know, the given in this equation, and our document and our conversations have got to start from, you know, from a weaker position. I mean, if you're at loggerheads, you're at loggerheads, but I would want to go, you know, with the strongest document at hand. And that would be one that makes strong recommendations and isn't a supplement Band-Aid. But I'll have more to say on that later. But
okay, Mr. Marshall, you said you wanted to speak.
There was also a comment from Elisa as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's go with Mr. Marshall, and then we'll go with Elisa.
Thanks. I just wanted to compliment Susan's point and just highlight a specific, what I would consider to be error, where we give too much deference to the DOT and would appear to be inconsistent with the access of active transportation on the canal, that being just simply the map on page 80 that's in the LWRP, where they have a turning lane, or that middle lane for the North Main Street Bridge, and it effectively does nothing because you're not turning left or right going over that bridge, but it's embedded in the document. And so my concern would be is if the board were to move forward with things as simple as that embedded in a document, how would you then, to Susan's point, go to the DOT and say, we don't want this, when they can just simply point to the active transportation plan and say, look, you got 3 lanes in there already?
I think,
Bob, can you hold off, please? Elisa had already asked.
But I need to, there's more information here that's important because there's a reason that drawing was in there, and I need, at some point,
Okay,
I need to.
Bob, we'll get back to you. Can you?
Okay.
We'll take a break here. Let's go in order here. Elisa, you requested to be able to make a comment. Go ahead. See, can we
Elisa, you're still muted.
Elisa?
Sorry about that. Yep, here we go. I agree with Dave and Susan's comments as well, very wholeheartedly. And having been in meetings with NISTOT, I would think that just even a strategy for us as a village, if they have agreed in a meeting to something we want, and I don't know, maybe you've already done this. I'm hoping the village has followed up, thanking them for the meeting and confirming everything in writing with them. So we start to have documentation about what has been accepted by NISTOT, and we can even every time refer back to our active transportation plan, because again, that is a document that has standing. I mean, I really think you kind of have to, keep nailing these guys down, because their model is completely based on something from like the 1950s. They're still kind of going back to all of that. The other thing I want to say just very quickly, just as an interjection about the accessibility from the Monroe Avenue Bridge. When you go over the bridge as you're leaving the village, please notice that the guardrail along the edge of the bridge ends up going right through the middle of the sidewalk. The NISTOT has pulled that off the edge of the street, so you don't even have full access of the sidewalk. And I brought that up in meetings with them, and they didn't even believe me. So, we've got a ways to go here. We have to really keep nailing them down and confirming it in writing with anything they agree to. Thank you.
Just a couple of quick things. When Renee and I have brought up the ATP to date, the first thing they asked was, has it been adopted? And that, well, it hasn't been adopted, we don't have to consider that. And that they've said that in at least 2 different meetings that we were in. The other thing is the pedestrian safety plan that we worked on, the drawings that were in, we tried to get rid of that turning lane because, as you said, Justin, it's useless. And if you narrowed it and brought the 2 traffic lanes together over the North Main Street Bridge, you could have a bike lane and you could widen the sidewalks. They still weren't willing to do that because they're aiming for a design speed which is much higher than we want traffic to travel. That's why the transition when the lanes move in and out are so gradual. And that's why we have this ridiculously long left-hand turn lane on North Main Street in front of the Village Hall that's never full.
And actually, they did studies of that corridor, and getting rid of that left-hand turn lane or shortening it wouldn't impact traffic, as well as getting rid of the right-hand turn lanes too. So that's part of the study that they did for the active transportation plan.
Correct.
So making this thing as strong as possible. I mean, Elisa, David, Susan, you are all correct. I mean, we need as a strong document. We need to make sure that we have as much as possible information for DOT. They are changing. They're changing even since 2017 when all the study has finished for the contract with Ingalls. They have a pedestrian safety plan, which is where we got all those yellow signs from now. Like statewide, they're recognizing that pedestrian safety is a priority. The fact that we got them to concede an extra foot on each side for the East Ave bike lane reduction, which has changed that corridor now from 4 lanes to that safer corridor. Even though we didn't get official bike lanes, we got almost official bike lanes and much more space. So, the more we can hammer away at like, this is what our community wants, these are what our priorities are, the better. And I don't remember DOT saying that they wouldn't look at a document that wasn't adopted. I haven't heard that. And to answer Elisa's comment about putting it in writing, I have attended that first DOT meeting with Bob, and I took notes, and then we followed up because we had a couple action items, and I wanted to have record of that, and we have followed up with them about one of the action items for that. So I don't know what was done before, but any meeting I go to, I try to put it in writing.
Okay. I've heard a lot of these conversations about the DOT, and I really like the suggestion from Susan about let's tell them what we want and let's come up with a plan that'll actually work for residents. And if the DOT doesn't implement it, well, that's not necessarily our problem, but step 1 is having the plan, and that would actually work for residents. I had asked about a capital projects complete streets checklist document. That's supposed to be the first thing DOT does. And it sounds like the village has never received that. Is that correct?
Yes, I would say that's true.
So I just want to read just a small section from the DOT's highway design guidelines document. We looked at this a little bit, but this is section 17.4. Bicyclists have the same rights and responsibilities as the operators of motor vehicles, except as provided by New York State law, section 1230 to 1236. When designing highway projects, it is essential to consider physical improvements for bicycles just as for vehicles in the traffic mix. Therefore, all state highways should be designed and constructed to safely accommodate known and anticipated bicycle traffic consistent with the needs identified by the capital projects complete streets checklist during project scoping. If a need for bicycle facilities is identified but cannot be provided, an explanation should be provided in the design approvals documents. So it sounds like step one, the planning process is for the DOT to evaluate bicycle needs, and we should be documenting some of that. But it sounds like they haven't reached out or are participating in the design aspect of that. Is that reasonably accurate?
We actually have had a conversation about bicycle lanes. Most recently, our focus has been on State Street because we've been working with the residents to address the speed problem on that section of the street. DOT, if you push them on bike lanes, what they always want to do is widen the street, get rid of the tree median where the street lights and the trees are, and push the street out further to accommodate the 5-foot standard bike lanes. And then they would continue to have a shoulder in the traffic lane. Obviously, that would be a disaster because that would make things worse. But we have been discussing with them through all of these discussions how to safely accommodate bicyclists. And, you know, I think it's hard for Renee and I to convey the level of pushback that we have gotten. Over the last 6 months, I've had 3 major conversations with DOT about these projects that are going forward. In each the Kevin, I forget his last name, but the new director of our region of DOT, I caught him. What's that?
Kevin Bush?
Sorry, Kevin Bush, thank you. I cornered him for 45 minutes when we did the public information meeting last, I don't know, January or whenever it was, because he didn't want to do any of the things that we were suggested. And then he started to backtrack, and we've made significant progress since then. But I just want all of you to understand that we have gone to the mat each time in each conversation and cited the specific things that were mentioned in the active transportation plan to try to push them as far as they will go. Our next meeting that we're going to have with them, at our last meeting, it was completely conceptual. We had notes, but no drawings from them. At the next meeting, they're going to have preliminary drawings for some of the things that they're proposing to change in the village. Yes.
Wait, are you? Go ahead.
What's that?
Yes, Justin?
Susan has her. I'm going to pause because Susan had her hand
right.
up.
So number one, like when is that meeting? And would we have time to organize some, oh gosh, you know, when you go around and ask people if they'll sign.
Petition.
Thank you. Sorry. We could put some petitions together. So, so you've had a conceptual meeting with them. My question is, when is the next meeting? And would we have time to present some civilian petitions?
All I can tell you is what they told us, Susan. And in July, we asked that question because we wanted to schedule the next meeting. And if I remember correctly, what they told us is said, well, we don't know. I think they said about 3 to 4 months. Is that what you remember, Renee?
Are you talking about the bridge project,
Yes.
the rehabilitation project? We have
Mhm.
very detailed plans for that, and we already responded as a board
Yeah.
to that.
We have detailed plans for the bridge, but I'm talking plans for the other things we talked about, the crosswalk, the striping,
Right.
the other issues. They said
They-
they're going to be doing more. That's a different planning group from the bridge people. It's the paving people, I guess.
Right.
But
You're talking about
they wouldn't give us a specific answer on when that meeting was going to be.
A month away, 2 months away, maybe?
I think more like 3 or 4 months from July would be my guess.
right.
Okay, so then I think we have some time to get a petition.
And we have a hard stop of October 2021 to get in their recommendations for State Street, which is going to be resurfaced. So there's another opportunity to get some of the gateway needs that we need there. And that's where this, like the timing of this is extremely important, getting way ahead of this. And these documents, the LWRP, the active transportation, all of this, and petitions, getting support, getting everybody to show up like they did for the bridge rehabilitation project input sessions, also to show that our priorities are not moving vehicles through as fast as possible.
One other just cautionary tale for you. Renee and I had been meeting with the State Street residents, and they requested to attend the meeting that we had with DOT. When we asked DOT, they normally only like one representative from a municipality at their meetings, and they don't allow the public unless they, on their schedule, stage a public meeting. And so, part of that is just consistent with their mindset. They set the rules, and they try to control as much as possible, but I just want everybody to be aware of that.
Right. So that, I think that speaks even further for petitions. No one from the public has to appear, but the petition can speak for hundreds, if not, 1,000 people.
Right.
Mm-hmm. You're right.
Justin, we can't hear you.
I'm muted. I'm sorry. I just saw a couple texts from Lily that showed up where she was wondering what the timeline for our decision is. And I'm not sure where we're going with that yet. What we were initially wanted to do was get our concerns listed. And then we're going to hopefully have a joint meeting with the trustees to go over that. But then we wanted to hear what the trustees are willing to do, and whether you want to make some changes to your amendment, whether you want to make some changes to the plan. I think we had some significant concerns, and we also think that it wouldn't be too hard to fix them. So I think we were hoping that some process would come along where some revision to either the addendum or the document gets made, hopefully fairly quickly. And then if I don't think there's likely to be a whole lot of controversy on some of the concerns. There might be a financial aspect or a practicality concerns as to whether you can actually do something. But if things are addressed, I think we'd be prepared to to approve this fairly quickly. But without knowing whether an addendum is coming or not, I'm not really sure where we're going right now with that. So the board will have to talk about it, but the sooner the trustees can give us some direction as to what they intend to do, the sooner we can decide how we're going to proceed on our review.
Justin, can I ask a quick question about, just to clarify something you just said? You want to know what the addendum will look like, and do you mean an addendum as part of the LWRP process that includes those 7 pages? Or are you talking about the one of the options we discussed, which was to adopt it and immediately go into working on an addendum, which would be, or an update to the document? Which one are you talking about?
Was, we would like to see the document updated in some means, either as an addendum or the document updated so it addresses some of the LWRP concerns so it can be adopted. I mean, this document can't conflict with the LWRP. And where it does conflict, we're hoping that you just make some updates. That's what we're hoping for.
Okay.
Um,
And does that mean updating it in the current addendum, which is the Word document that's attached to the end? Or do you mean in order for it to comply with the LWRP, you believe those need to be actually in the physical document that we get from Matt Ingles, whenever that is?
I don't think we care how you fix it. We just want, you know, whatever is adopted and is the plan. Now, if you need to read, you know, document A and then document B disagrees with it because it was easier to edit, whatever the legal comprehensive plan is needs to comply with the LWRP.
Okay. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
So I think what we are expecting is either the trustees to, you know, explain why something isn't in there or just make some changes. And I think we're completely flexible as to how you make changes, and we understand there's some practicality concerns and financial concerns. Do any other members of the planning board have a comment on this line of question?
Just a brief comment. I personally would really appreciate if there were some things that could be fixed before we vote on this. I think that, you know, we all want the strongest document that we can possibly have with as much input and refinement as possible, and we don't want to unnecessarily hold this up either. And we fully understand that it's taken too long to get to this point. So I think that, you know, the goal is to get a document together that we all feel great about. And that helps us to communicate effectively and provide leverage to agencies like the DOT. I think that there are a few different ways that we can do this. One is possibly just by clearly delineating what the responsibilities of the ATP are. You know, we've talked about, well, active transportation is really transportation, but that's not what it says in the first page of the ATP. They actually define it as saying that it's human-powered mobility, primarily walking and biking. And then it goes on in the second page to talk about recreation. And so, you know, I think there's actually some confusion in the basic definitions. And maybe if it doesn't go into recreation, then let's change the definition. And we can figure out what the territory is and say, well, this other stuff is actually over in the LWRP. So I think some definitional changes can go a long way. You know, it does say in the first page of the ATP, it doesn't cover, well, it's mostly walking and biking. So if we want to say, well, all of the recreational water uses go to the LWRP, and let's point people in the right direction there if that's not the territory this is supposed to cover. Some of the other issues that we've talked about, we've got the document that we sent over to the trustees, and we've got a couple of other things that we're discussing preliminarily that we might be able to pass along as well. And of the changes in there, it seems that some of those are, you know, there are some things that could be updated, but actually we haven't talked about that many updates. I think that, you know, we all understand that the document is a bit dated, and we have no problem with updating into the future. The bigger things that are a little more troubling to me are errors in the document that we've seen in the ATP, things that should just be corrected, and places where the plans conflict. And I think it serves all of our interests to get those places clarified.
Any other comments from planning board members on this line of discussion?
Just my quick comment. When this was referred to us, it was referred in the form it comes now. So we're requested effectively, and make sure my understanding is right? We're requested within a period of time to provide an LWRP consistency review of the document that's been presented to us. Whether or not there are changes that should be in this document that we feel strongly about, that would suggest either A, we have those references be put forward in our review, and then the trustees do with it as they may. Or what I don't think is likely to happen is that we're going to get a revised document to do another LWRP consistency review on, in part because of the work that would go in with the town. Am I correct in that?
We could require conditions on the approval.
Yes.
So that's another
Yep.
That's another option.
Okay. So we can.
I think that's a good option, because I think our board, we're probably going to agree with almost everything that you suggest. read through the comments quickly that you had made so far, and there's nothing that I would disagree with. I think that our only concern that Renee and I have is just getting, making sure that we can work in unison with the town. I think also I would certainly be in favor of agreeing to do a more thorough update so we move right into getting a usable, concise village document that actually takes out the stuff that's awkward in there and reworks it. I think it's well worth the effort to do so, because I think this is probably one of the most important planning documents for the village, because this issue is so important.
So then to follow that up again, just following the understanding of how this might progress, we can review the existing document, potentially approve it on certain conditions. Hopefully those conditions we've talked through with you, the board, sufficient to believe that you could present it to the joint meeting with the town in a way where its focus is strictly on the village matters, or to the extent that it involves the town, it's fairly reasonable to think they would accept, and have you go, even though that's outside of our jurisdiction anyway. So let's just stick to the LWRP review and conditional approval on some additional components added in. Then you could take that to the town and say, okay, we're coming to the table ready to approve this document, the ATP, with an LWRP approval conditional upon these elements being added. And provided the town has no problem with those, you guys can all move forward and get this thing ratified quickly.
Correct. And I spoke to Bill Smith after I spoke to Susan last week, and he told me whatever changes you want to make in the village part are fine with me. So I don't think that's a problem, and that sounds like a sensible strategy to move forward.
Okay.
We also,
any thoughts?
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Any thoughts about how to resolve the conflicts with the town and the town's LWRP?
Well, I think
I guess it's not worth discussing because that's not before us.
it's outside our jurisdiction, ours as well as yours. So I think we should try to focus on stuff in the village.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. Susan?
Yeah, so at this point, I would like to reiterate something. Sorry, planning board members, you've heard this before, but this is an active transportation plan. And a lot of the language in the recommendations starts with consider. So it doesn't really sound like a plan. This sounds like a preliminary. This sounds like a prelude to a plan. And so would I, even as a citizen, be moved by the number of recommendations, almost half, that start consider or maintain. And I read that as consider doing this or keep it the same. And so I'm disappointed in the in kind of the lack of teeth that this ATP plan has. And even some other recommendations call for further study. This has now been 5 years. I get, things happen, but to ask for further study or to ask for, somebody, I'm not even sure who is supposed to, where's this can kicked, who is supposed to consider more. So I thought it was in terms of plans, should I say a little on the weak side. And the great thing about the planning board is that we get to look at plans, like real stuff, like the driveway, like, a house, a development. And I think that that this document, unfortunately, at least in my mind, falls short on that.
I agree with you, Susan. I think we saw that on the comp plan also. And I think it's planners have a tendency to do that. It's too passive, and that's really not what you want. I agree.
Well, so I mean, I did have a question about that. Even in the LWRP, it says explore, putting a light, explore with DOT to put a light. It said a light could go there. So even that language is light. And I think part of that is that you don't really know until you get in there. So like when we recommended in the pedestrian safety action plan, whatever the heck fire that thing's called, where we looked at putting the crossing and a bump out in front of the library. And as we did the walkthrough with SRF and the traffic engineers, we realized that it couldn't go, our design wasn't going to work there because of the cost with the sewer there. So we had to rework that. So yeah, how do we put in, without being definitive, how do you do that? Go ahead, Elisa.
May I make a suggestion on that? Because that is that's solvable, and it is a question of language when we do the sort of, updating, this ongoing update. So, it could be explore putting in, say, the light in X, or another, some other mechanism that further enhances pedestrian and bicycle safety. So you always create the language, so you're not painting yourself into the corner, but you say, we need to do something. If it's not a light, it's got to be something else. In other words, it doesn't even have to be as specific, because as you said, Renee, you find out, oh, gee, there's a sewer there, or there's something else going on. Well, that doesn't mean you walk away from that area and say, gee, nothing can be done. But I agree, we have to have stronger language that says, we've identified these areas as hotspots. We need to do something. And that is, I agree with Susan, that's where we need to beef up the language. And that's solvable, that's editing.
You don't feel that identifying the trouble spots and saying, consider this solution is enough. You need you want it to be stronger language.
Well, I think we do need stronger language. I actually am in agreement, because even with the language we have now, and even with how we're negotiating with NISTOD, I kind of think we need a little bit of a full court press. And as Susan said, engage the public, have petitions, keep this thing moving. This has been years and years and years in the making.
I agree with that. We should be direct.
Sorry, I'll have one comment, then Justin, you can chime in. I think something that's really missing, and one of the documents I looked at talk about coming up with a transportation plan. One of the aspects of it is coming up with with one, goals, and two, a way to evaluate it. So what are the objectives? How do we measure if it's working? So this is something that's a kind of a severe lack in the ATP. The calls for traffic calming, but what is the objective, and how do we measure whether we've achieved it? So if our goal is to have cars travel, the average car traveling less than 30 miles per hour on State Street, that would be a great goal to have. And then bring that to DOT. It says, okay, if you don't like this plan to solve it, propose something that will get our traffic speeds down to 30 miles an hour. So I think that's a big component that's missing, is in a way as a metric to evaluate how we're doing. Likewise with bicyclists, if we're making our roads usable by bicyclists, I know some of our discussions have been, are the bicycle lanes actually wide enough so the average user will feel comfortable and safe traveling on them? And again, the metric is kind of the number of people using it. If you're calling it a bike lane, but it's not wide enough to be so that someone could travel with their kids in the village, they're not going to use it. They're going to ride on the sidewalks. So you're not actually, getting a bike lane on the road. Just because it's striped a bike lane doesn't mean it's going to get used. So
right, painted bike lanes don't do it. We know this.
So I'd encourage considering adding a section of goals and metrics to the plan, so that we can actually evaluate whether it's doing what we wanted it to do.
And are you proposing that would go in the update, or that's a requirement before it could be considered consistent with the LWRP?
I'm just bringing it up as something, LWRP doesn't require it, but I think that would make it a stronger document, is if we establish criteria And then we evaluate the plan against the performance criteria. So the performance criteria, what do we want it to do? How do we want it to perform? And a way of evaluating. I just think that would be helpful. So I'm just passing that along to the trustees and ATP committee members. Mr. Lightgib, you said you wanted to comment, so go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that I agree with Susan's comments and Elisa's comments that the language should be direct. I think we've seen that the perhaps more passive approach with the DOT does not work, and we should be direct there. And we also don't necessarily always have to shoot with exactly what we want. If there's a less invasive, less expensive option for the DOT, we should consider asking for what we really want and have them draw us back in negotiations rather than taking the easier approach first. I think that applies to some traffic calming and bicycle amenity plans we've discussed at a high level.
I think, you know, just from our experience with DOT, although I agree that language should always be direct, I don't think it'll be a factor in negotiating with DOT. I think what is important is justifying the reasons why we're doing things and capturing, as Elisa mentioned, the real goal here. So maybe the goal isn't a flashing beacon, there's another way to achieve it, but you want a direct statement about the goal and then acknowledge that there's a vetting process, because the engineering for all these improvements cannot be included in any planning document. That's something that will happen and roll out incrementally over time as the document is implemented. But you do want the direct statement about the goals, and consistently it is weak in the active transportation. I call it planner speak. And I think that's why I think the, you know, a complete reformatting of the document as an update, even if it doesn't change the content, just makes the document clear, usable, and something that we can use as we move forward.
Okay, I guess I have some questions for the rest of the board members as to how we want to use the rest of our time tonight. We've got some good feedback from some of the trustees. We've heard the DOT is a concern. We've heard good comments from the board that let's come up with a plan that actually works for our residents, and not dictate to DOT. Let's tell DOT what we actually want, and whether they implement it or not is another matter. But for the rest of our meeting tonight, we had this draft document on some citations from the LWRP and some draft recommendations that we were discussing in our last several meetings. So for the other board members, do we want to get into that document tonight, or do we want to discuss it at a subsequent meeting?
I'd be fine with going ahead with that unless anyone else has comments from outside of the board.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we do have a deadline, you know, to act on this. And we have been discussing certain things, so I'm in.
Okay, Justin, can you give me screen share abilities? I think you're the moderator. I just have the document up on my screen and I can just share it.
Yeah, let me try that.
And Justin, with regards to going through these sort of line by line in our comments, would our objective be to have the members of the board here today essentially say possible or not possible with regards to considering an amendment to add, or just to hear their comments on it in general?
You cut out a little bit there, so I couldn't fully hear your question.
Oh, I was simply asking, with regard to going through this document with the members of the village board present, would we be looking to determine if it is possible or not possible for these amendments to be put in place through a supplement, or instead are we just looking for general comment?
I think we've been approaching this like any ordinary application that we've had, which is we look at what's before us, and then we may have some comments, recommendations, and then we compile those, present them to the applicant, which in this case is the trustees, and then they can address us, which won't be tonight. I would expect them to evaluate things offline, and they have the option of saying, well, we'll amend the document, or we won't amend the document, or we think this is not a good idea. Here is why. This consideration really doesn't make that feasible. So, but first of all, we just need to get our comments out there, and then this is opportunity for more dialogue. I don't know where it's going to go from there, but first phase is just getting our comments out there. So I wanted to try to get through this fairly quickly. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. We can go through this. We have some members of the trustees. So what we have in this document here, and we discussed this in a couple other meetings, but there's some actual citations from the LWRP, and then we have some recommendations for the ATP committee or trustees to consider.
And Justin, sorry, a question from Elisa about the public hearing. I believe we're still keeping that open, right?
I don't intend to close it until we're ready to vote on this. So I intend to keep the public hearing open. Maybe before we go into this discussion, let's talk about when our next meeting is going to be. Are we okay with having a meeting next Monday at 6 p.m., which has been our traditional time?
Sure.
Yep.
Good with me.
Okay, so we'll keep the public hearing open and we'll continue discussion on this next Monday at 6 p.m. Okay, so we'll announce that first. So let me go ahead and dive right into this document here. We'll do a screen share, and I think this will be good for any members of the ATP committee and the trustees to kind of see what some of the things we've been reading and some of our concerns. Okay. Okay, so here's this document, and we haven't circulated this yet. Basically, this was extracted from draft notes from a couple meetings of ours. So we're just going to work through it as a group, I think. So let's go ahead, and I think I've shared this with everybody. So I don't know if planning board members, if you're, let's just go through this page by page. It's 5 pages. The recommendations are fairly short. So please go ahead and chime in if you have any comments on this. So first of all, we're on this LWRP policy 1.1. And this was the section that really talked about supporting pedestrians, supporting bicyclists, even if it comes at the expense of cars. So here's our quotation right here from the LWRP. I've highlighted it. First of all, can people read this on the screen?
I can. Yep, I guess we're good.
Okay, so does anyone have any comments on this to start with? So our comment was just amend the ATP as appropriate to implement crosswalks that are visually and texturally different from a roadway.
Are you asking us to comment on things we've already gone over?
Well, do we have an amendment to any of this?
Pardon?
Does anyone have an amendment to any of the stuff in the document, or are we all in general agreement on this document that we don't need to make a lot of changes?
The only amendment on this one, I just wanted to say that this is something that's mentioned in the LWRP. It's not present in the ATP. It seems like this is a scenario where the recommendation conflicts since other things are talked about in crosswalks. So I would just like to see clarity, you know, is that recommendation no longer relevant? And should we not consider it anymore? Or is that something that we should add to the ATP?
I think the ATP called for some crosswalks with some advanced signaling in there, and I'm not even sure if there is a plan for what exactly that was. I'm not sure if we are concerned about it, but I think we were just calling this out and wondering, is a change needed to the ATP for crosswalks and so on? It sounded like you want to avoid conflicts. I'm not sure there's a conflict.
I don't think, oh, sorry.
Oh, no, I don't know if this is just something that's not covered in the ATP. So I'm just wondering, from a complete streets perspective, do people do textured crosswalks or not? And if they don't anymore, maybe we could just say in the ATP in an amendment, we talked about this in the LWRP, but that's not cool anymore. So.
Renee, do you have any comments on crosswalk?
I didn't know if I was supposed to talk or not because I'm just observing your discussion. I don't think the ATP absolutely does not rule that out. It provides some basic, recommendations, but if you look at traffic calming techniques, when it talks about enhancements, when you can do a texturally different crosswalk, it does help. They're more expensive. There's some problems with, depending on what you put up with snowplows and things like that. So, but I don't think this is I don't think the two conflict here. I don't think the ATP is saying don't do that. Don't put textures out. I don't know, Bob, what?
The question to me then, in terms of reconciling these two documents, maybe it's not an outright conflict, but where do you look? If one document is more specific than the other, and it's actually the very old document, then we can't really say the ATP is a canonical traffic calming document anymore. I'm worried.
Well, it's not supposed to be a canonical traffic document. You're supposed to look at all of these together. And like if you have a trouble spot, we know that Lincoln, the crosswalk at Lincoln Avenue or all along Main Street, if we put textures there, it would definitely alert drivers to something different happening and they would behave differently. We know this is one of the things to consider, but I guess I don't see a conflict here, but because you would look at both.
The reason it wasn't included in the ATP is because we tried to keep the proposals to what was realistic. We have one textured crosswalk in the village that was done as an experiment. It was free. They're very expensive. And, we tried to put in the things with the least amount of dollars would do the most good. And that's why that isn't specifically cited in the ATP. But it's just largely because of the cost.
Okay, so I think this could be rectified by just adding one sentence to the ATP to consider adding crosswalks that are visually and textually different from the roadway where feasible, or make it less passive than my sentence right there. But so this is easily rectified.
I agree.
Okay. Anyway,
Justin, sorry.
Yeah.
How about visibly and or textually different where feasible? Because they're doing a lot of things with striping these days.
Right, with paint and artwork.
And art, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right.
If I could just interject, it really goes back to a much more general topic. It's under the umbrella of visual cues to be provided to increase pedestrian and bike safety. So you're right, whether it's, art, whether it's something textural, they're all under that umbrella of visual cues to calm traffic.
Yeah. Good.
Okay. All right. So I made a couple minor changes to that sentence. Okay, moving on. We have this next section here. I'll highlight it. It's a citation from the LWRP. Talks about incorporating bike lanes along its streets and linking them to residential areas of the village and town activity centers. So our comments on connecting the bicycle boulevards together, that was something that we've discussed in several meetings, but bicycle boulevards being not a connected network were a real concern that we had. It doesn't connect people to the canal, doesn't connect people to the schools. So having a bicycle boulevard on Sutherland Street, but then not have it go have any means to bicycle over the bridge on Monroe Avenue, for example, is kind of a problem. So we really thought in our discussions that improving access to the canal really needs to be a core tenet of the ATP, and it needs to go farther than it does right now. So we had some recommendations in here. Does anyone have any board members have any comments on the recommendations?
Nope, I still like them.
So I would just simply say, with regards to our ability to have this document be amended during the approval process, to the extent that we can incorporate, sorry about that break, to the extent that we can incorporate connectivity specific within the village so that a village amendment could be easily adopted, I think it would be worth pursuing just to embed in the supplement the boulevards would connect from this street to this street or this street to this street as our goal. Our comments on a board level were, though, specific to the town and the village, and how these interconnected bikeways really didn't get you anywhere. And it would be really nice if we were in the village to be able to say, hey, I want to go to Henrietta, how do I get there? Or I want to go to Mendon Ponds Park, how do I get there? By following the blue line or the red line, and actually have, to some extent, markings over our streets as to how to be navigating easily around. But I think if we can focus on the village and trying to connect those boulevards, it'd be great.
I just had one other comment on this one. I agree with these recommendations as well. I would love to see them there. I guess just in the spirit of moving this along, since it seems like this might be a more difficult area to integrate, I would also consider, again, just going back to changing the definition. The ATP says in one point, when they talk about connectivity with the canal, they talk about the canal as a source of traffic. They say there's a route on Shane Place to the intersection with State Street. The route is already heavily used by bicyclists because of the proximity to the Erie Canal Trail. So it's a source of traffic. But if we say that, the ATP, the scope of the document doesn't talk about encouraging connections to the canal trail, and that's required by the LWRP and intended to be defined in more detail in a further supplement, then like I said, I'd like to see it, but if it's out of scope, then it's out of scope, as long as we define it as such.
Well, I think if they make an amendment to that that says that access to the canal needs to be improved, and if they don't have time to do all the details, they can maybe flesh out the process for it, and maybe it'll come at a later date.
Yep,
This does need some study, and we did at one point, the village little team put together the sort of some concepts of how to get through the middle of the heart of the village, which is the problem. For example, I biked down to go get pizza, and I have to use the sidewalk because I'm on Monroe Avenue and can't get over there. So the problem with the bike boulevards is that we have a couple, and we do have to start somewhere. So we start with, Sutherland, Boughton, whatever we decide are the best, calmest streets. And the idea is to get you off of the main streets with a bike boulevard, get you off of the main streets, giving you an ability to go, pretty much parallel to where you're going, so you don't have to go out of your way. So instead of going on Monroe, we don't really have another option except to go to Washington and snake over through Church Street and go that way. Our problem is connecting the bike boulevards, and it's part of a bigger issue that we need to figure out, because the Four Corners is a deadly place for cyclists right now, unless you're a spandex wearing cyclist, and even then it is. So we don't know what the best recommendations are at this point. If we put bike lanes on the street, that will make the emergency services won't have a problem with that. But what we really need is protected infrastructure through that middle section of the village. So I think this is getting back to Light Geb's comment. This is part of a bigger, how do we put the language in there so that we continue to explore this? We did mention that we need something through bike lanes through the heart of the village, so that at least we have the space for that. it connects you off of the bike boulevards and then down to the canal path and other things. So I disagree that the ATP doesn't talk about connecting places, because it does. The struggle is knowing what the right mix is for our village, because in order to put the bike lanes on our street, that would mean we'd get rid of parking on many of them, just because we don't have space for it. So we do need, in this case, to study it to know what the best network plan is for our village. I went on a bender. I'm sorry, that wasn't very jointed.
No, that's okay. I think in our discussions, we had identified two things that would help a lot, which was connecting the bicycle boulevards on Lincoln to Locust, which is just like a couple 100 feet. Maybe you can get rid of 4 parking spots and make a safe way for people to bike. And again, connecting South Street to the canal, which is like 1 block. So it might mean just a wider sidewalk for 1 block. And so I think adding things like these as action items in there is relatively easy. And maybe we don't have to solve it all now, but just adding it as an action item in there, I think would solve the problem.
Okay, yeah, I would love, I mean, this is just such a friggin' nightmare to get through the heart of our village right now. So I would support adding some language that doesn't tell us we need bike lanes, because we don't know if that's the right thing. It may be a cycle track eventually or something. Like, we don't want to box ourselves in either. Because some of the,
money. They need to build a bridge over all of our roads, right? For bicyclists. They pay for it.
Yeah. I mean, if we slow traffic down to 15 miles an hour through the heart of our village, then if you're on a bike, you won't mind being mixed with someone going 15 miles an hour. But that's a Amsterdam pipe dream.
We just need to require all dumpsters get installed in the middle of Monroe Avenue for all the businesses to let people drive around.
And a fountain back in the middle of our 4 corners.
Okay. Any comments from board members on this section? Nope, I'm not hearing anything. But I'm also not seeing anybody moving, so maybe my internet's gone. Okay.
I think since we have talked about a lot of these too, I'm not going into the detail that we've already discussed.
Yeah, well, I mean, the trustees can comment in response and tell us if these aren't feasible or what they want to do. But I think stressing again is that some fairly small changes, I think, can be done to fix the discrepancy here. Now, my bigger concern is with the town, because the town made no efforts to make access to the canal functional or usable. And I was chatting a little bit with Renee about this. Like, I think it's ridiculous that people that live on 65, that live like a quarter mile from the canal, have to put their bikes on their car and drive to the canal so they can go on a bicycle ride with their kids. And the town sees that as just fine, and they don't want to upgrade the road so that it's actually safe for people to commute down that. But go ahead, Susan.
Doesn't won't the planning board of the town conduct a LWRP consistency review?
I think it's up to them. My suggestion would be that we send a copy of this document to the town planning board.
Yeah. But I kind of thought that would be part of their process, but no, what do I know? But yeah, let's send it to the planning board.
Okay.
Yes, anything we can do. I mean, this is a start to moving the town along in its thinking. So anything, sorry, my dog's making noise. Anything we can do, and providing suggestions to them during the adoption period is really helpful too, because they've got a lot more real estate, and they need to make some priorities, which they did with this. So anyway, I'll be quiet now.
Yeah, I know they had some good additions in there, but there's also, I think, this improving access to the canal for nearby neighborhoods is something that they could really improve a lot. Okay, can we move on to the next section here? Any other comments from board members? Okay. We had a question as to whether, I guess, what quotation and what to support this particular recommendation. Does anyone remember this? This was like a quotation that we took from new construction, I believe. And we had a discussion about that is, yes, we need to improve the bridges and so on, but is this really the citation to support that recommendation?
I'm sure we can find others, Justin, if you are looking for others.
I found an important part in section 4 on page 12. I don't know if you want to use that.
Section 4 on page 12, was that, Joanne? You're a little bit hard to hear.
Yes, section 4, page 12 in the LWRP.
This quote's actually from section 5, page 14 of the LWRP, and it falls under site issues, which falls under site design and architectural issues. So I think that the general comments of this particular quotation are generally understood to be in other parts of the document that wouldn't fall under a site design heading.
Yeah, I agree.
So I guess this recommendation to improve the bridges to accommodate heavy pedestrian and bicycle travel, in particular, well, I guess all the bridges could be improved, but the North Main Street one really needs wider sidewalks, as we've discussed. It really needs bike lanes. There's so much traffic between Shane Place area and the downtown business district. We want people to go visit our shops and restaurants that are out for a ride on the canal. So, I mean, I think we identified this as the top priority, probably for the ATP, is to get our bridges to function for pedestrians.
Justin, along those lines, the site design of the North Main Street Bridge, which may be forthcoming at some point, this would pertain to that in the LWRP, correct?
Yeah, the LWRP does call for improving access to the canal. It's over and over and over again in there.
Right. Okay, good. But the challenge there is whether or not it's maintenance or a major structural improvement, right? So let's consider it maintenance, in which case they don't necessarily go through the LWRP consistency review. They might look at it, but they also may look at the ATP. So I just want to, I don't know where we do this, but I really do want to make sure that they address that extra middle turning lane inside the North Main Street Bridge. I'm very concerned still as to the supporting comments as to why that remains in the ATP and why it wouldn't be amended.
Yeah, well, I still think they're not doing maintenance. If they change the striping of lanes, it's not maintenance. It's designs. They're changing the width of a sidewalk on that bridge. They're changing the striping of the middle lanes. It's no longer maintenance because it's not the same. So if they want to put new pavement down and have it striped the same way as before, that's maintenance. If as soon as they start installing anything else, though, I looked at their definition, the DOT's definition of maintenance. This isn't maintenance, from what I understand what they're doing.
Then to this quote here, and specifically the recommendation, because that would be site design of a major change, not maintenance, would we use this comment here in this quote within this section 5 to draw attention to the Main Street Bridge inconsistency with regards to the striping that currently shows up in the ATP? That's a question, not an answer. Because again, on one hand, it's important to say there's things not in the ATP, refer to the LWRP. The ATP doesn't cover this, refer to the LWRP. It's another thing to say The ATP is wrong or inconsistent with what the LWRP tells it to do, or what it should do. And when looking for those inconsistencies, not just connectivity, but design, I think this is one of those things that we need to make sure we highlight. And maybe this is the section to refer to specific for that. Because it's inconsistent straight up, and they should fix it.
Right.
I think. I mean, why have turning lanes that go nowhere? And I hate to hammer it home, but our job is to find the inconsistencies, and this is a clear, almost fabrication of intent. I couldn't find in any of the charrette comments where it said have a turning lane on North Main Street Bridge.
Right. You're right, Dave. Yeah.
And so when we change that, we're not changing the intent of the public. It's not like we're taking away something they said that we should do. That was, right. I think that's made up deference to the DOT.
Petition.
Sure. But at a minimum, I don't want the ATP to say something different than what the petition outcome would be.
Right. So this needs to change, and we'll pass that recommendation on.
Yeah, okay. This may be the right place to do it because it is about site design, and it is, to Justin Fletcher's point, major. If it's not just, if it's restriping, it's major.
Yep.
Not repaint.
So we had this one citation, but I just amended this note to say this recommendation is supported by multiple citations in the LWRP. Improving access to the canal is vitally important, and improving the bridges is a crucial component of that. So I don't think we need to go work too hard to come up with more citations because we agreed that's throughout the document. Does that seem reasonable to people, everyone?
Yes.
Yep.
You know, Justin, you might want to say remedying a problem on a bridge instead of improving. And because that will enforce Dave's point that there's something that's really very wrong on the bridge. And so I think that calls for a remedy and not just a blanket improvement to bridges.
Okay, so how do you want to word this?
I don't know, put remedy in somewhere.
We need to weave in a way that's obvious enough to the DOT folks. They might have liability if they don't fix it.
Yeah, say, specifically, removing the stripes on the North Main Street Bridge, the center striping on the North Main Street Bridge, which have already, caused a major accident.
Renee?
Yes.
Question with regards to the ATP, charrettes, and the public input sessions and all of that you had participated in. Was there ever a time in those discussions where the public said we want to have a turning lane on the North Main Street Bridge?
No. Why you keep referring to that? Can you the North Main Street Bridge, a turning lane?
Yeah. Do you have the ATP in front of you?
A turning lane. Are you talking about the concept drawings?
Yeah. So again, one of my big concerns, I keep referring to it, but when you put a picture of a concept in a plan, and the DOT looks at it and says, what does the public want here? And it says 3 lanes across the North Main Street Bridge on a concept drawing. Well, clearly that concept shouldn't be in disagreement with public input. So
wait. Let me just pull it up. I know you're talking about the SRF designs, right? As part of the pedestrian safety.
It's page 80
plan.
of the ATP.
Okay, hold on. Let me pull it up.
And that's 80. It's actually 85 if you're using PDF page documents to jump there.
Okay, hold on.
And the reason I'm hammering it home is because it's clearly inconsistent with the LWRP. And so if we're going to fix things, I think there's some things that are more deferent.
Yep, hold on. I'm getting there.
It's the conceptual North Main Street streetscape plan. And if anybody on the planning board thinks I'm going at this a little hard, please let me know. I will back off.
All right, I just typed some stuff here. I don't know if anyone can follow what I've been typing.
Yeah, I think that's good. Or instead of in particular, maybe say for instance. That way, in case there's others we didn't notice.
There you go. So the thing that I find comical is the State Street Bridge has no center striping on it. I'm sure if you if you point it out to DOT, they'll immediately make the sidewalks narrower and put in a striped lane in the middle of it, according to what Bob said. So the State Street Bridge doesn't have that. And I wonder if I still have, I could bring up the photo, but I went over that before.
That's okay.
So, what they've done here is shortened the already existing turn lane. This is, you're talking about the conceptual plan. They've shortened, there's already an existing turn lane there. And based on the traffic studies that they did as part of the active transportation plan, they determined that they still need a left turn lane, but that they needed to shorten it because right now it's way too long. So that's the part. Is Bob still on here? Because this is part of the pedestrian, the SRF study.
Here's this key quote in the LWRP, which is if there's a vehicle and pedestrian interaction occur where they conflict, you got to yield to pedestrians. So I think the LWRP specifically tells the DOT you can't favor cars. You have to favor pedestrians, particularly in these areas around the canal. And, you know, bogus left turn lane versus bicycle lanes. Even if you look at the DOT's documents, the DOT says we support bike lanes, we support bicyclists, we'll incorporate those where reasonable.
Yeah, I remember this study from when SRF did it, and that they shrank that, because right now if you travel in that turn lane, you know that turn lane goes all the way back to like the Port of Pittsford Park. So they're proposing shortening that, and that's where that flattened, different textured median island came in, median island.
That's not what this conceptual drawing does. This conceptual drawing.
What are you talking about? Hold on, let me. I'm on this little tiny Chromebook, and I want to make sure that I'm on the right. I'm on page 80. You're talking about Port.
Blow up the bridge.
Yep.
And if you blow up that bridge, there is no end to the turn lane.
Blow up. Yeah. Hold on.
So
I'm gonna.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, is Bob still on here? Because this concept, they did it with SRF, and they did it based on the traffic study. And I know that Bob knows this like the back of his hand, why the decisions were made for the way it is.
If I might jump in, it may be that they have some turning arrows in there. That if they goes out of there, then it actually becomes a striped, non-existent lane marker, right? So if you blow off that bridge, right where the C is, right, to your point, they're shortening up the left-hand turning lane going south on Main. Right where the A1 is where they allow that left turn lane to exist. But then if you look between the two striped yellow lines cutting across the bridge, they have two arrows, as though you're turning anywhere. But what you're saying is that should all be marked off and hashed off as yellow and non-drivable.
I don't believe that's the case. I think it's based on the traffic study. So we either need to match up, and I wish Bob was still on here because I don't know why they ended up with this drawing. I was not a trustee at the time. So I need Bob to weigh in on this one. So can you put in the notes? So we either need to rectify it by saying something about the LWRP, which is what you're saying, or change the drawing.
And I think the study too, as much as the study might have been completed, that said you need a turning lane here from A all the way up to D.
Yeah.
Right? So you might have a study that suggests that could very well continue to be inconsistent with the
Right.
LWRP.
Yeah.
That's our
Yeah.
Like, I don't care if a study says, hey, yeah, it'd be great to have a turning lane here. That restricts access, and to me, it appears inconsistent.
Fair enough. I wish he's not on here anymore. I don't see him.
Yep.
This is his, and maybe Elisa remembers. I don't know how they came up with this particular one.
But I think you're right. Now that I'm looking at it even more, in between the yellow, maybe it's intended to be striped off. But if it's striped off, you don't ever go on it. So why the turning lane?
No. I don't believe it is. This was just again to your point about it's a concept. It's one idea that they came up with during some of the planning.
Can I interject just really quickly?
Good. You're here because
yes.
I wasn't here for part of this. When this
I'm not so sure that drawing was accurately updated to reflect,
okay.
And I think, and I may not even be recalling it as accurately as Bob probably could, because I do remember we went back and looked at things and they had only made partial changes in terms of what the input was. And this may be
right.
one of the older maps that was not, or drawings, excuse me, that was not updated, all the way through. So that's something we need to revisit. And Bob may actually have that information too.
Yeah, I was hoping he was here
Yeah.
because later we changed that after meeting with the emergency services as part of the whole pedestrian safety plan, which further
Right.
in the document you'll see that there's a different concept given
Right.
that was finalized with. So we could just remove this out of here. I mean, it's one example of how you make a streetscape prettier with trees and how you enhance it, but I don't want to remove it without Bob. So can you put a note in your because Elisa's right. This is something we
Right.
updated and I don't think they updated.
No, I don't think that they did. And we may end up removing it.
Yeah, it might be better because it conflicts with the drawing
right.
that we ended up with
everything else we did in the future. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, which had the flush medians and parking spots, and SRF worked with DOT and the emergency services to get something that's a concept everybody. Yeah, so maybe can you make a note that we just remove that out of there, or we got to edit that somehow?
Yeah, it should be updated or removed.
Yeah.
I have a picture of the North Main Street, the State Street Bridge up here. And this one, I mean, if you can make the other bridges, the one on North Main Street, a lot closer to this, that would be great. So this is 7 to 8 foot wide sidewalks. If you can get a full 8 feet, great. On this one, it looks like there's even room to make the sidewalk wider. So then you could get that mixed use path that's 10 feet wide that bicyclists and pedestrians could use. And then, I'll just throw this out there. Renee, this is spinning around looking the opposite direction. So this is standing at the end of Boughton Avenue. One way was the bridge. The other way is the South Street. There's very small trees here. So again, this is an opportunity, a wider sidewalk. You might be able to connect that whole area straight through to South Street. Then you have a good bicycle boulevard that's connected to the canal, which could take you, wherever you want to go. So this is something we were discussing recently. All right.
Yeah. Okay. I have some things to say, but we don't need to address that now about that.
Now. Yeah. I'm just sharing some things we looked at previously since you're online.
Yeah, and we're in a fight right now because to make sure we keep that sidewalk is beyond what is recommended by standards, and so we don't want to lose it. And the new buttresses or whatever they call it, I'm not an architect, but however you build a bridge, the new railings they use, the way it's going to connect to the bridge structure itself, we're going to lose a little bit of space on that sidewalk, which is already, as you mentioned, really wide, and we wish all our sidewalks were that wide over the bridges. And we're going to be losing about 6 or 7 inches, and we are trying to convince them to put that out to extend the curb so that we maintain the width of the current sidewalk, if that makes any sense. So we're going to need to bring the public out to fight for that.
I think the citations are, it recommends that 8-foot sidewalks be installed in any heavily trafficked area. And our LWRP says we got to get access to the canal. The
Right.
bridges are clearly a heavily trafficked area. So by federal sidewalk design standards, that needs to be 8 feet wide. I think it's.
And I'm not even sure the North Main Street Bridge right now is even ADA compliant. It might be even too narrow for that. I meant to go out there with it, but anyway, they're not. That it's another opportunity.
But our thought was 8-foot wide sidewalks on the bridges would be a really nice addition for all the bridges. So anyway, it sounds like you agree if we can get them.
Can I interject one tiny little thing? And I know it's a small bucket of ice water, but when I had the occasion to bring that up with NISTOT, part of if we want to expand the sidewalks on the bridges, and I think we have to absolutely go for that. I agree with everything. It calls into question additional engineering for the bridge, for the weight of the additional concrete that goes on. So we just have to be prepared for that pushback.
Right.
They can
In which
do
case
it.
we could ask for a protected bike lane, but then
Right.
that runs into the emergency services not having enough by what's required by fire code to get through those bridges. So it's complicated. And we want that's why we need to put the language in that, like, we know these are trouble spots. We know these are high volume areas. Let's explore everything we can to prioritize pedestrians and cyclists without prescribing they need to be this width. I had forgotten, Elisa. Thank you for reminding me about the additional concrete weight.
Yeah, it's a big deal with them.
Yeah. And that's why they won't allow us to take the stripe. One great addition would be to take the painted striped medians that are all along our bridges and actually make them real medians.
Right.
We can't do that because they won't allow that on bridges because of the structure and the weight.
Right. Because they're also factoring in how much tonnage each bridge can take for trucks and, large vehicles.
Yeah.
Well, whatever. I can leave something out about that. All right, well, let's move on. Do we need to take a short break? For anything, I could use a brief break to refill my beverage. And
Justin, what about a break to next week?
I think that's okay with me.
It's okay with me. I think a lot of people have a lot of things to think about.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's keep going through this document next week then.
Is it possible for you to send this to Elisa and me and the mayor too, just because we have access to the 7 pages of comments that you all gave us, but we haven't seen the comments about how it does or doesn't comply with the LWRP, and it would be really helpful for us to have that ahead of time so that we can, because again, we want to make this the best document we can. And I'm so appreciative that you all are, like, I feel like for so long, Elisa and Brooke and I have been trying to do this by ourselves, and it's so helpful to have your eyes on this. So, but if we could get this, realizing that this is a draft and you guys are probably going to change it, and I don't care if you share a Google Doc, I roll with Google Docs because they're living documents, and you don't have to give me edit function either. I can just read it. I just want to know what the issues are.
But I have no problem with sharing this. Does anyone else have thoughts?
Good idea.
Let's share it.
Good idea.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, you guys.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll share it then. Justin, can you stick it on as a Google Doc and we can share it with people and we can edit the document live at our next meeting?
Sounds good. I'll do that right after this meeting.
All right, I will forward you this. I will forward this to you and when I or after the meeting.
So Justin Leedstra, did you add anything to this?
I made a couple minor changes, nothing substantial. I'll forward it around to everybody.
So this is the, Justin, I think I've still got, we're editing in the, do you have a local copy there, or is this the cloud Word document?
This is a local copy in Microsoft Word on my computer.
Okay, do you want to just send me that that document then, and I'll put it into Google Docs?
Yep, we can do that, and I guess that will get stuck in our meeting packet for our meeting next week as well. Do we want to, by the way, I think it makes sense to formally adopt our recommendations that we already sent to the trustees. I think we forgot to vote on that.
Oh, sure.
Yep. You know, we already sent to them.
So moved.
Okay, so the comments then that we had on pages 75 to 96, the motion is to adopt those, and we'll insert those into our minutes, I guess, from this meeting. Does that make sense?
Yep. Second.
Sure.
Okay, how do you vote?
Aye.
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 Aye. Okay. Another quick question before we adjourn here. Does any other, did any of the board members, did you get a copy of any of the draft minutes yet for our last couple regular meetings? Linda had prepared them. Okay, so I guess Linda hadn't forwarded them around yet. So we can add those to our agenda for next week as well to review the minutes.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Sounds good.
And I just wanted to throw one final comment out, and we talked a little bit about this. There may be some conflicting views in terms of how we think about the ATP and the LWRP, but I would really like to see in the ATP a comment to the fact, and Justin, like Gab, you've mentioned this, and I think a few others, effectively saying that the ATP is subject to an LWRP review. The LWRP is not subject to an ATP review. We have a LWRP that is the master document by which the ATP has to come in underneath, though they do complement each other. And to that end, you know, we're subject to the task of pointing out the inconsistencies and expecting them to be made correct. And so, you know, I just want to put that out there.
Yeah, agreed.
And
Even though we already have a policy that says that any new plan has to undergo an LWRP review, you still want it in the ATP somewhere.
Yes, in my view, it would be nice if the ATP did, because there are many overlapping comments.
Okay.
And if someone were to read the ATP as a document by itself, they may not give enough deference to the subject matter that's pertained in the LWRP. Gotcha. And just like nice quotes early on about how the ATP mentions recreational access and the canal, and I think you mentioned boating. But Renee, in your opening comments, you kind of talked about the ATP, Gene, just walking and bicycling. And so some clarity in terms of definitions. Justin, I completely agree with your comments, and I probably wouldn't have so eloquently said it either.
Yeah, I pulled those comments from when the town decided to undergo the plan and what the purpose of the plan was to improve pedestrian and cycling.
And I think what's funny about that is I think in the village section, you could just add a comment that says, yeah, the LWRP is a plan, you know, refer to the LWRP with regards to these other things.
Yeah, I think Justin already had that. I wrote that on my list. I think that's one of the first things Justin said is put a comment on, refer to the LWRP for waterfront recreation. Okay. Something like that. Yeah. So there are probably a million other little places where we can insert that. Let's do it.
Yeah, I think if you do it once or twice well, you don't necessarily have to do it everywhere else.
Yeah. I would like there to be something that says that you can't look at this alone, that you need to refer to the local waterfront consistency plan as well.
Great. Okay.
Okay.
Sounds good.
I'm gonna go finish my dinner. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Renee.
Thank you, Renee.
You're
Thanks,
muted,
Renee.
Justin Glitch.
Thank you, people.
Justin Glitch, you're muted.
Thank you. I was just thanking Renee for all of her comments. That was good to hear from Renee and from Bob and from Elisa, and I appreciated hearing from them. So that was great. Thank you.
Thanks for your time on this.
Okay, so are we, I think the motion is to adjourn at this point. And we'll
Second.
continue discussion next. We're going to keep the public hearing open until next week at 6 p.m.
Yeah, I think
And
so.
then I don't intend to close it then either. So, okay. So do we get a second on the motion to leave the public hearing open and continue discussion next week at 6?
Second.
Okay, how do you vote?
Aye.
Aye. Let the record show that there was unanimous consent on both the motions, both to adopt the comments on pages 75 to 96 and on leaving the public hearing open and continuing the discussion next week at 6 p.m. Next Monday. What is that? August 24th, I believe. So with that, I'll just make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Good to see everyone.
Aye.
You
Good
go.
to see you.
Aye.
Bye.
Have a good week.
All right, bye, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So I think